Assassin's Creed is back after a 2-year absence with Origins. This latest title, developed by Ubisoft Montreal over a 4-year period, changes the setting to ancient Egypt, with a world that's about 4 times bigger than that of Black Flag, along with reworking the core gameplay mechanics in areas such as combat and how the mission structure is handled, in addition to delivering visual upgrades in a number of areas. It sounds like there's been a pretty big upgrade here, and on first impressions, from a visual perspective, there's definitely an improvement over Syndicate. The lighting appears fuller with more ambient light sources in play, draw distances are definitely fleshed out with less in the way of pop-up, and there's a sense that we're looking at one of the most detailed Assassin's Creed titles, although in terms of sheer density, it doesn't match the incredibly complex streets of Paris seen in Unity. Assassin's Creed Origins also provides solid support for PlayStation 4 Pro as well, with a healthy resolution boost. So you get improved image quality whether you're playing on a 4K screen or a full HD one. And that's something that Ubisoft previously struggled to deliver with Assassin's Creed Syndicate, whereby the initial PS4 Pro patch for that title actually resulted in an image quality downgrade through what looked like a poorly implemented solution for checkerboard rendering, although this was later fixed with a straight up 1620p resolution. Either way, Assassin's Creed Origins hits the ground running from day one, and the experience is a lot better. So just what are we looking at on PS4 Pro, and how does base hardware compare? For a start, Assassin's Creed Origins appears to drop the fixed frame buffer used in previous games, in favour of a dynamic resolution solution, where pixel counts are adjusted on the fly according to rendering load. That means on PS4 Pro we're looking at a range roughly between 1350 all the way up to 1584p in less demanding moments. Whereas on base PS4 we generally get results handed in at native 1080p, though things can dip a touch below. Dynamic resolution actually works quite well here due to the developers also using temporal anti-aliasing, which ensures that these shifts in resolution aren't overtly noticeable. Curiously, we noticed what looked like evidence of checkerboarding artifacts across furs and feathers. However, it's possible that this is actually artifacts caused by the temporal anti-aliasing resolve, as all other signs point to the game using straight up dynamic res without any checkerboarding shenanigans in order to boost pixel counts. Now in terms of the Pro, usually games that run between 1440p and say 1600p usually don't look all that great on a 4K screen. The amount of upscaling there tends to introduce some roughness, which sometimes can make the game look worse than a native 1080p title running on a full HD display. But in the case of Assassin's Creed Origins, the game actually delivers a notable improvement in resolution. And the trick here is in the use of anti-aliasing. Looks like there's a temporal component in action here, and this provides a nice smooth image. It doesn't pass for native 4K as there is some softness present across edges and texture details, but on a 4K screen you're definitely getting the feeling that there's more sharpness, clarity and resolution compared to the base presentation on the 1080p screen. And base PS4 holds up pretty well in that respect. If you're playing on a 1080p display, then the standard PS4 delivers an image that, while it's not pin sharp, it's still smooth and looks clearer than what we saw with the likes of Assassin's Creed Unity, which runs at 900p. So whether you're playing on a 4K or 1080p screen, Origins generally looks very good from a resolution standpoint. But what else can the Pro deliver? Well, to be honest, in terms of core visual feature set, both Pro and base PS4 are basically identical, though that's not to say the Pro's resolution boost can't deliver improvements here. Take the texture details for example. While the artwork is the same across base and Pro, moving up the pixel count on Pro allows more details to be extracted from some pretty finely detailed texture work. So you're definitely getting a lot more out of the artwork, and the extra level of clarity is definitely noticeable across things like the intricate threading on character clothing, which really stands out a lot more prominently on PS4 Pro. Curiously, we also noticed occasional scenes where texture quality was simply better on Pro in general, particularly on some characters during cutscenes. However, it appears this could be a streaming bug, as the level of detail is otherwise identical elsewhere when comparing the core assets. Either way, it seems that if you want to get the most detail from the game, then the PS4 Pro is the way to go. Likewise, things such as texture filtering and bitmaps are also handled with more precision on the Pro. The increased pixel count means that there's more samples used when filtering between different bitmaps. So while anisotropic filtering is the same, you're still getting clearer details on the Pro. Essentially, while the core artwork is the same across both consoles, the increase in pixel count at least ensures that we're always getting the highest quality assets at any given time. It's not a major upgrade, but it's certainly something that adds a little more clarity and refinement to the detailed look of the game. And this is also true when playing on a 1080p display as well. Origin on the Pro uses super sampling when hooked up to full HD screens, resulting in improved image quality over base hardware. Whereas the game looks a little soft on the standard PS4, playing on the Pro delivers a similar level of sharpness to that of a native presentation, but with the additional layer of anti-aliasing on top, meaning we get more clarity to various elements across the entire game, whether it's the finely detailed texture work across character clothing to extremely small details set far off into the distance. Of course, not all of the benefits of running at ultra high pixel counts come through when playing on a 1080p screen via super sampling. Elements such as the improvement in texture filtering resolve isn't quite as noticeable here, but at least overall image quality is given a boost over the standard PS4, and when you're playing on a large HD TV, that's definitely something that will count. Aside from that, the presentation looks pretty identical. In some scenes, the use of ambient occlusion looks to be slightly improved on the Pro, although as we're looking at a dynamic time of day cycle, it's possible that differences in lighting could be causing the variances we see here, even though the cutscenes are supposed to be fixed to specific times of day. Perhaps we're looking at just a slight tweak to the effect on the Pro. Graphical quality generally holds up very well across base hardware and PS4 Pro, but what about performance? This is one area of the Assassin's Creed series that has been, well, really up and down depending on what installment you play. It was very solid in Black Flag, but absolutely crippled at points in Unity, where the ridiculous NPC count into the hundreds pushed console CPUs to breaking point, with frame rates dropping down below 20 FPS at points. It really wasn't great. Whereas on Syndicate, the visual downgrade allowed generally a much smoother experience closer to the 30 FPS target. Well, with Origins, things are looking a lot better than Unity, although it's fair to say that we're not getting a completely locked 30 FPS experience all round. To start, let's look at PlayStation 4 Pro. It's fair to say that the game does hold 30 frames per second for quite a significant amount of time. Less complex scenes generally don't cause the game much in the way of trouble, so we can explore a fair bit of the environment, engage in some combat without performance really being impacted. So it's pretty smooth, right? Well, not all the time. Thing is, when we venture into more detailed scenes, such as riding through a village where it's surrounded by a multitude of buildings, lots of alpha-based plants and foliage, and of course NPCs, then performance tends to fall below the desired target of 30 FPS. Now the actual frame rates don't appear that bad, but what's kind of annoying is the unevenness. If you look at the frame time graph, we're looking at metrics going from 33 milliseconds down to say 55 milliseconds, back and forth, and this creates an annoying stutter that can sometimes look and feel worse than it actually is. And this can not only occur when riding through more complex environments, but when scaling the rooftops or generally going into areas that's more dense in terms of population and detail. Which means that over the course of the game, gameplay can feel a little bit uneven. It's smooth at 30 FPS at points, and then at other times not so much. Now performance is certainly not ideal, and at times it really feels that this aspect of the game has taken a step back from Assassin's Creed Syndicate in this regard. Of course, it's worth bearing in mind that we are looking at a more graphically enriched title that also features a more complex world simulation as well, meaning that the engine is simply having to work much harder to deliver that 30 FPS update we'd expect. It's not exactly a deal breaker, although I do find the intermittent stuttering quite distracting at times, especially when you're trying to track multiple enemies during combat. Thankfully, we're never looking at a Unity situation here, where performance would just fall off a cliff at points. So I feel that although we're not getting an absolutely stable 30 FPS at all times, the gameplay still manages to hold up, even if frame rates aren't always ideal. On the other hand, cutscenes are just, well, a complete disaster if you ask me. Performance fails to hit 30 FPS pretty much consistently, and as you can see here, things don't look very smooth at all. There's a lot of judder, and it kind of takes you away from the cinematic nature of these scenes. And this is disappointing given the excellent motion capture work and general performances on offer. Story plays a key point in Assassin's Creed, and it's kind of disappointing to see the stutter getting in the way of becoming more fully immersed in the actual world the game is presenting to you. The experience on PS4 Pro then, I guess isn't too bad, but could certainly use improvement in some areas. But what about base hardware? Well, comparing the two side by side, and performance is quite similar between both consoles, at least in areas which don't heavily stress the engine. Sometimes the base PS4 can be ahead, at other times it's the Pro, but this appears to come down to more individual gameplay runs rather than console specific advantages. That being said, in more demanding scenes where there's more going on in terms of complex environments or additional NPCs, then PlayStation 4 Pro does hand in the smoother experience here, with fewer frame rate drops and longer stretches spent at 30 FPS. But when it comes to the cutscenes, neither version is really satisfactory here, and both suffer equally from heavy frame rate drops well below the 30 FPS target, and well, the results really aren't great. So this is one area where the Pro doesn't appear to benefit from the extra horsepower on offer, although you'll get a slightly smoother ride during regular gameplay. Overall, in terms of performance on both systems, perhaps some of the issues we're seeing could be resolved in a future patch, where further optimizations can be deployed. In this case, I feel that maybe offering up a performance mode could have worked well on the Pro. Assuming that these frame rate drops aren't related to CPU bottlenecks, then perhaps something along the lines of a native 1080p mode, but with more stable frame rates, could have been an interesting option. It's always good to give users a choice in situations like this, so that they can get the best possible experience for their setup, especially in games where the Pro cannot provide a boost to both image quality and performance. So that's the PlayStation 4 side of things. We'll be interested to see what Xbox One X brings. After all, PS4 Pro delivers a healthy boost in resolution, but we're not getting radical upgrades in other areas that perhaps you might find on the high-end PC experience. Now, we haven't seen the PC version running at max settings, but in the past the PC version has always delivered a visual upgrade, whether that be shadows, draw distances or even texture detail. So the Xbox One X, with its greater GPU power and increased RAM, has more potential to go beyond just delivering a boost in resolution. Of course, alternatively, we could just get a bump in pixel count that's higher than the PS4 Pro, but we'll have to wait to find out. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this look at Assassin's Creed Origins. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.